In this video, we're going to get started with giving the player a defense ability called Blast Attack, which is pretty much the use of the Puzz Weapon _ Blaster that we created before. There's going to be a few things different with this Puzz Pickup Factory than the other ones, but a lot of it's the same as well. We start off, it's obviously placeable, and then we have a variable dynamic light environment component called iLight. Then we have a variable integer called power time with power time in parentheses. You could actually put anything you want there, but that's just the category name. When the level designer places this Puzz pickup factory into the map, he can go into the properties of that pickup factory and actually change the amount of time he wants for the creature or for the player to be allowed to use this ability. So that can be changed on the fly. So in case if the person says, well, when he picks it up, he's got a long run, so I'm going to give him some more time. Or maybe he thinks, well, I only want him to get off one shot. So, things like that. Also, inside function give_to, we're going to change that up a little. Also, we're going to say that if it's a player controller, then we're going to call on a function called allow power attack, which we'll be creating, where we pass in the power time, and we're going to use the same functionality that existed before. So we will actually spawn an inventory item. Down at the bottom here, we set power time to 10 at default. So if the level designer decides not to set this, it's set to 10 at default. And then inventory type, we're going to set that to puzzlegame.puzzweapon _ blaster. So we have our we're using basically that weapon we created. And then finally, of course, we've changed a few things, obviously, with the skeletal mesh, anim tree template, the anim sets, and the physics asset, because this is, after all, a different skeletal mesh than one that we've used before. This will be a skeletal mesh pickup factory as opposed to a static mesh pickup factory. Now that we have all that in place, we're going to go inside of our Puzz player controller, and at the top we have a variable bool called bblast_tack_on. This is just to let us know whether or not we're currently in the blast attack ability. This could be used later for many different reasons. Even though it's kind of used weak at the moment, we can definitely put it to use later. And then in here we have function allow power attack, and we pass in integer, and we're going to rename it time. So when this gets passed in, we're going to rename it time and use it like that. And then we're just going to say if it is not currently on, if we're not currently in the blast attack, we want to set the timer based off of time, which is the amount of time we set through power time. We're going to say false on the loop. We're not going to loop this, and we're going to use the function called blast attack timer. Also, we're going to set blast attack on equals true as well, so that in case if he picks up another one for some reason, that kind of thing. Now, inside of function blast attack timer, we set blast attack on equals false. And the reason for that is because this timer will get called only once, and it will be called after the time expires. So if it's 20 seconds, then when 20 seconds hits, then it calls this function. So this function really turns it off. It's not a function that's continuously clicking every time. And then we're going to do a for each pawn.inventory_manager.inventory_actors class Puzz weapon and then Puzz W. So we're going to do an iterator, and what we're going to do is we're going to search through all the inventory items inside the pawn's inventory manager, and we're going to try to find the one that represents the pawn's weapon. And when it matches, we're going to remove that weapon. So what's going to happen is, let's say 10 seconds expires, we shoot down here, and it's going to loop through the player's inventory and try to find the one inventory item that it can remove because it's the one it's holding. Now, here's the downside of this, which this code can be changed easily to make it work properly, but for right now, since we're only giving him really one weapon attack anyway, this is going to work fine for us. The downside of this is, let's say the player times himself properly. Let's say he grabs the blast attack, and then he goes, okay, I know about 10 seconds is about up, so I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to switch my weapon. If he had another weapon to switch to for some reason, then what would happen is it would actually remove that weapon. And it wouldn't remove the blast attack, and then he could switch back to the blast attack and just keep using that continuously. So there is a downside of this. However, because we're really not giving him any other options, it's not going to affect our game at all. I just want to bring that up to you because if you decided that you wanted to give him other abilities that involve using an actual weapon or inventory item, you would not want to go about removing the item in this way. Then we have a clear timer called where we're going to say blast attack timer. So we're just going to turn off the timer just in case, even though it should turn off anyway. It's just nice to kind of keep it there just in case like that. And that will pretty much handle the blast attack. Now, also what we're going to do is each creature starts off with 100 hit points by default. And that's not exactly ideal for us if the blast attack only does 10 damage points. Well, we can do numerous different things. One, we can make the blast attack, the weapon, do more damage based off of if it's held by a player, or we can have the creatures, the AI, spawn with less hit points. Well, we're just going to do both just for the sake of argument. So we'll go inside of Puzz character information. We'll create another variable constant integer starting health. And down default properties, I set some of these here, and you can do this as well. I said starting health equals 100, pawn scale equals 1, normal speed equals 220, and beacon pickup equals false, because most of the time that's probably where these will be. Now if you feel like you want to set the normal speed a little lower for default, or the pawn scale a little higher, I mean, whatever works for you. But it's nice to have some of these set so that they're not 0 by default, because that's what happens if you don't set these. Then what we're going to do is, because we do want the starting health to be different for enemies, we're going to go under Puzz enemy information, and we're going to set the starting health to 20. So what's basically happened now is, even though Puzz character information shows starting health at 100, the enemy information, which is a child, now overrides that. If you wanted each enemy to have separate health on top of this, you could just go into each separate enemy and set the health even more different based off of that need as well. If you want all enemies to start off with a 50 by default, you could set that by setting that here. So that's kind of what we've done. Also, we're going to change the power of the projectile. So we're going to go inside of Puzz projectile, and we're going to go into simulated function post begin play. And we're going to do super post begin play because we want to keep that code. Actually, what we're really doing, since we already had this function, is we're just adding a little bit of code here. We're going to say if is player controller damage plus equals 10. So we're basically adding 10 to the damage. Now if you want to add more, you can. That's up to you. And then under function bool is player controller, or we're going to create this function, and we're going to say local player controller PC equals player controller, and we're going to typecast the owner dot instigator dot controller. And then we're just going to say if PC is not equal to none, return true, otherwise return false. Now you might look at this and go, how do you know to typecast that? Well, the reason why is because when we spawn a projectile, we set the owner to the weapon. Under Puzz weapon blaster, actually, if we go to that and you go down to here where we do projectile spawned, we do equal spawn projectile class self. The second parameter in spawn is who the owning class is going to be, and it's going to be obviously this Puzz weapon blaster. So because we do that, we can then say, okay, well obviously the owner in this case is going to be the weapon. Then the instigator of the weapon is actually the other owner, so it's pretty much the pawn. And then the controller of the pawn is the player controller. So we have weapon, pawn, controller, and that pretty much moves us in. So we can typecast the player controller to this, and it'll let us know whether or not it is a player controller or not. Obviously, if the AI owns this weapon, it'll return none. If it's a player controller, it returns our player controller. And that pretty much does it for this. So now if you started the game and you were to walk up to these creatures and collect one of these blast attack pickup factories, you would basically have 10 seconds to shoot at these creatures, which in essence is about 3 shots. And if you hit them, it'll kill them each time, because we set their hit points to 20, and we set the damage basically to 20 as well, since the original particle does 10 damage. So now we're doing 20 damage. And that completes this video.